The sky over the contested sector of space was choked with alien warships, an armada so vast it eclipsed the distant sun. The Zarkari Imperium, a race of towering insectoid conquerors, had spent centuries expanding their empire unchallenged. Every world they touched either fell in line or was reduced to nothing but smoldering rock. And now they had come for Epsilon Prime, a human colony on the farthest edge of explored space. The Zarkari never expected resistance. Humanity was small, weak, barely worth notice on the galactic stage. Their fleets, the Imperium believed, were laughable compared to the might of an empire that had crushed countless civilizations before them. So when the Zarkari fleet encircled Epsilon Prime and demanded surrender, they thought it was a mere formality. But no response came. The Zarkari, confused but not concerned, assumed the humans were simply preparing for inevitable surrender. They gave them an hour, then 2. When there was still silence, they laughed among themselves. "Their fear has frozen them," chittered war leader Zelkar, his mandibles clicking in amusement. Typical of a lesser species. He raised a clawed hand and gave the order to commence orbital bombardment. The first barrage of plasma lances tore through the colony's outer structures, reducing buildings to slag. The planet burned, explosions sending plumes of fire and debris into the atmosphere. This was how it always was. This was how it had always been. Until the alarms started blaring. Something was coming. Something was warping into the system at speeds the Zarkari had never seen before. The first ship dropped out of FTL with a thunderous rip in space-time, a monstrous construct of metal and rage. The UHS Retribution, a Terran dreadnought, eclipsed the nearest Zarkari cruisers in sheer size. Its hull was lined with scars from past battles, yet it exuded an air of unshaken defiance. Then came another, and another. Within moments, the once empty void was brimming with hundreds of human warships, destroyers, frigates, carriers, behemoth-class capital ships designed for nothing but destruction. The Zarkari fleet, so confident moments before, now found itself staring at an impossible reality. Humanity wasn't just fighting back. They had come prepared for war. Zelkar's mandibles twitched in disbelief as he processed the readings. The humans had never been reported to have a fleet of this magnitude. No intelligence suggested they had built anything close to this. Yet here it was, undeniable and terrifying. A human voice crackled over the comms, strong and unwavering. "This is Admiral James Carter of the Terran Defense Fleet. You have attacked a sovereign human world. You have one chance to retreat. If you refuse—" He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "Then you will burn." For the first time in their history, the Zarkari hesitated. And in that moment of hesitation, the first human railgun volley tore through their front lines like a god's judgment. The first volley hit like a divine hammer. Kinetic rounds, accelerated to a fraction of the speed of light, shredded through Zarkari warships as if they were made of paper. The vanguard of the alien fleet erupted in a chain reaction of fire and destruction. Hulls cracked open. Crews were vaporized before they could even react. Zelkar's command ship shook violently as debris from his fallen fleet pelted its shields. The war leader's mandibles spread wide in shock and rage. "How?" he bellowed. "How do they have such firepower?" The Zarkari had fought hundreds of wars. They had crushed dozens of species beneath their clawed feet. Not once had they encountered this kind of resistance. Humanity had been considered weak. But this was something else. "War leader," an officer screeched, mandibles clicking nervously. "The humans are advancing! More ships arriving from hyperspace!" Zelkar turned to the tactical display and felt a wave of cold dread. The humans weren't just pushing forward, they were surgically dismantling his fleet. Their dreadnoughts formed an impenetrable wall, while smaller destroyers weaved through the chaos, launching precision strikes at vulnerable points in the Zarkari formation. Human bombers swarmed like angry hornets, striking engines and weapons systems with terrifying accuracy. This wasn't the desperate, chaotic defense of a weak species. This was an execution. The Terran fleet moved with discipline and coordination that the Zarkari had only seen in empires much older, much stronger. But humanity wasn't old. They were young, reckless, and ruthless. Admiral Carter's voice cut through the battlefield's chaos again. You had your chance to leave. Another barrage of railgun rounds fired. The Zarkari tried to counter, but their weapons were too slow, too outdated. Their plasma beams took too long to charge, while human railguns could fire in rapid succession, delivering city-leveling devastation with every impact. One of the Zarkari dreadnoughts, the Emperor's Claw, tried to turn and flee. Before it could activate its jump drive, a coordinated strike from 3 human battlecruisers punched through its shields. The ship exploded, sending shockwaves through the battlefield. Panic spread. A new realization dawned in the Zarkari ranks. They had always been the hunters, the conquerors. But now, they were the prey. Zelkar's claws gripped the edge of his command console. His officers were screaming at him for orders. Should we retreat? Call for reinforcements? We can't win this fight. But the war leader was frozen. He had never considered that there might come a day when the Zarkari lost. His mind raced through centuries of conquest, and none of it mattered. Not here, not now. Sir, Zelkar finally snapped out of his stupor, his mind settling on a single desperate thought. If they ran now, the Imperium would never recover. The humans would see them as weak. And if humanity had this kind of power now, what would they have in a decade? There would be no retreat. He straightened, mandibles clicking with finality. All ships, concentrate fire on their flagship, he growled. We kill their leader. We break their will. Across the Zarkari fleet, orders were relayed, and the surviving warships shifted their focus. Plasma turrets turned, missile bays opened, and dozens of beams of searing energy lanced toward the UHS Retribution. Admiral Carter watched the incoming fire, calm and unshaken. Brace for impact, he said. The human dreadnought's shields flared as plasma scorched across its surface. Hull plating melted, armor buckled, but the ship held. And then it returned fire. The Retribution's main cannon, a magnetic accelerator so powerful it could crack moons, began charging. The air inside the ship hummed with energy as the reactor diverted everything into a single, concentrated shot. A shot meant for a war leader's ship. Zelkar barely had time to scream before the world turned white. The Zarkari command ship, once the mighty fist of the Imperium, stood no chance. The moment the UHS Retribution fired its main cannon, a blinding lance of energy and kinetic force ripped through the void. It struck the alien warship dead center. For half a second, there was silence. Then the entire vessel detonated. A massive explosion consumed the war leader's flagship, sending debris spiraling outward like dying stars. The shockwave rippled through the battlefield, knocking smaller ships off course. Chunks of twisted metal, remnants of what was once the pride of the Zarkari fleet, slammed into nearby vessels, causing secondary explosions that rippled through their lines. Zelkar was gone, and with him, the Imperium's iron grip on the battle shattered. Panic set in. Across the remaining Zarkari fleet, officers chittered in fear. The chain of command had collapsed. They had never expected to lose, never expected the humans to be more than a minor nuisance. But now, they were being slaughtered. War leader Zelkar is gone. Their flagship still stands. We cannot win. The fear spread like wildfire, and soon, the once mighty Zarkari fleet did the unthinkable. They ran. Dozens of ships broke formation, activating their FTL drives in sheer desperation. Some didn't even plot coordinates. They just wanted to escape. Others weren't so lucky. Human warships cut off their escape routes, picking them off one by one. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the Retribution, watching as the Zarkari fleet collapsed. He had seen many battles, but this one? This was a turning point. The galaxy had long ignored humanity, treating them as insignificant. But now? Now the stars would remember this day. A voice crackled over the comms. It was Captain Vasquez from the UHS Titan. "Admiral, the Zarkari are retreating. Should we pursue?" Carter exhaled slowly, staring at the wreckage of the enemy fleet. He knew the war wasn't over. The Zarkari Imperium was vast, powerful. This was just one battle in a coming storm. But today, they had sent a message. A very, very clear message. He turned to his comms officer. "Send a transmission to the Zarkari homeworld," he said. "Make sure their new war leader hears it loud and clear." The officer nodded, awaiting the message. Carter stepped forward, his voice firm, unwavering. "You came to our colony thinking no one would come. You thought we were weak. You thought you could wipe us out like all the others. You were wrong. This is your only warning. If you ever threaten humanity again." He looked out at the battlefield, at the smoldering remains of the once mighty Zarkari fleet. "We will not stop until your empire is nothing but dust in the void." The message was sent. The war had only just begun, but the galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. The aftermath of the battle hung in the void like the remnants of a dying star. Wreckage from the once mighty Zarkari fleet drifted aimlessly, broken husks of warships that had once inspired terror across the galaxy. Fires still raged on some of the larger vessels, their atmospheres leaking out into the endless dark. Bodies, both human and Zarkari, floated in the debris field, silent testaments to the cost of war. But while the Zarkari had been defeated, humanity knew the war was far from over. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, Admiral James Carter studied the holotable in front of him, his eyes sharp and calculating. The battlefield had been theirs today, but soon the Zarkari Imperium would regroup. Their pride was too great to allow this humiliation to stand. The next attack wouldn't be a raid or a skirmish. It would be a full-scale war, and humanity needed to be ready. "Status report," he ordered. Commander Liu, his second-in-command, nodded. "We've secured Epsilon Prime. Civilian casualties were minimal thanks to the planetary defenses, but the colony took some damage during the initial bombardment. We've already deployed engineers for repairs." Carter gave a small nod of approval. They had saved the colony. But at what cost? "And the fleet?" Liu hesitated, her expression grim. 17 ships lost, 34 heavily damaged. The Titan and Vanguard have suffered critical hull breaches, but their crews managed to seal the compartments before total collapse. Casualty estimates are still coming in, but we've lost a lot of good people, sir. Carter's jaw tightened. 17 ships gone, thousands of lives lost, and this was just the beginning. "They didn't die for nothing," he said after a long moment. "They proved that humanity isn't to be trifled with." Commander Liu straightened. "Sir, if I may, what's our next move? We sent the Zarkari running, but they won't stay gone for long." Carter turned back to the holotable, pulling up a star map. The Zarkari Imperium was vast, stretching across hundreds of systems. It had taken them centuries to build their empire. But humanity had done in one battle what no other species had ever accomplished. They had broken them. "We don't wait," Carter said, his voice firm. "We hit them before they can hit us. Hard. We take the fight to their front lines, disrupt their supply chains, make them bleed." Lou raised an eyebrow. "You're suggesting a counter-offensive?" "Damn right I am," Carter said. "If we sit back, they'll come at us with everything they've got. But if we strike first, we put them on the defensive, make them question their own strength." The bridge fell silent as the weight of his words settled in. For decades, humanity had been ignored by the larger galactic powers. They had been seen as insignificant, unworthy. But today, that perception had changed. Today, they had announced themselves as a force to be reckoned with. And if the Zarkari Imperium thought they could just lick their wounds and return for another round, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. Carter turned to the comms officer. "Send a message to High Command. Tell them it's time to stop defending humanity's place in the galaxy." He turned back to the window, watching as their ships began to regroup. "It's time to claim it." The War Council was convened within hours of the battle. Aboard the UHS Retribution, the highest-ranking officers of the fleet gathered in the strategy room, their faces illuminated by the holographic projection of the Zarkari Imperium's domain. It was vast, stretching across hundreds of systems, spanning the width of multiple sectors. But even the mightiest empire could fall, and Admiral Carter intended to be the one to tear it down. Seated across from him were representatives from Earth's unified military command, appearing via holographic transmission from high above Terra. Among them was Fleet Admiral Sarah Whitaker, the highest-ranking officer in the human navy. Her face was lined with years of experience, her silver hair pulled back in a severe bun. "You're proposing a preemptive war, Admiral Carter." Her tone was calm, but the weight behind her words was immense. "I'm proposing survival," Carter corrected. "We all know what's coming next. The Zarkari won't sit on this loss. They'll retaliate. And next time, it won't be a raid on a colony. It'll be a full-scale invasion." General Vargas, the head of ground forces, folded his arms. "And you think hitting them first will stop them?" "No," Carter admitted, "but it will cripple them. Right now, they're in disarray. We didn't just kill their fleet, we killed their war leader. Zelkar was the backbone of their military doctrine. Without him, there's going to be infighting, a power struggle." He gestured at the map, highlighting key sectors. "If we strike here, along their supply lines, we can keep them from amassing another invasion force. We don't need to conquer them, we just need to make sure they're too weak to come after us again." Silence filled the room. It was a gamble, a bold one. Fleet Admiral Whitaker studied him for a long moment. "And what if you're wrong? What if this just enrages them further?" Carter leaned forward, his voice low. "They already see us as insects. They came to our colony expecting no resistance. No one thought we would come, but we did." His gaze swept across the room. "Now, we show them that we are not prey." A beat passed, then another. Finally, Whitaker gave a slow nod. "I'll authorize the counteroffensive," she said. "But you understand the risks, Carter. If we do this, there's no going back. The war won't be fought on just one battlefield. It will become a war of extinction." Carter's voice was steel. "Then we make damn sure we're the ones left standing." The fleet mobilized within days. The first target, Vel Rax Station, a key logistics hub for the Zarkari military. It was located in neutral space, lightly defended but essential for refueling and resupplying their forces. If humanity could take it, they would choke off a major artery of the Zarkari war machine. As the UHS Retribution and its battle group dropped out of FTL, the station loomed before them. Alarms blared across the Zarkari comms. They thought they were safe. They thought they had time. They were wrong. Carter stood on the bridge, eyes locked on the target. "All ships," he ordered, "fire at will." And just like that, the counteroffensive began. The first salvo of human firepower slammed into Vel-Rax station like the fist of an angry god. Torpedoes streaked across the void, their warheads detonating against the station's shielding, sending rippling energy waves across its surface. Mass drivers from the UHS Retribution and her sister ships unleashed their payloads, kinetic slugs punching through hull plating and igniting oxygen-rich compartments in spectacular bursts of fire. Within seconds, the once calm neutral space was transformed into a war zone. Inside the station, Zarkari officers scrambled. "They're attacking?" one of them screeched, his mandibles clicking in disbelief. "Humans do not attack first." "They do now," another hissed, slamming his clawed hand down on the comms panel. "Send a distress signal. We must call for reinforcements." His words were cut off as a human torpedo pierced the command center. The detonation ripped through the hull, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. There would be no reinforcements. The humans had planned this strike meticulously. They had jammed the Zarkari communications the moment they arrived, isolating Vel-Rax from any outside assistance. This station would fall, and no one would come to save it. From his place on the Retribution's bridge, Admiral Carter watched the battle unfold. "Status?" he asked. "Shields on Vel-Rax are down to 40%, Commander Liu reported. Their automated defenses are struggling to keep up. Enemy ships in the sector are either retreating or going dark to avoid detection." Carter smirked. They were afraid. "Good. Prepare boarding teams," he ordered. "We're taking that station intact." The order was relayed, and within moments, human assault pods launched from the fleet. Dozens of them streaked toward Vel-Rax like falling stars, slamming into its outer hull with magnetic clamps before cutting through the bulkheads with precision plasma drills. Then, humanity poured in. The corridors of Vel-Rax became a slaughterhouse. Zarkari warriors fought desperately, but they were caught off guard. They had been expecting another species to fear them, not one that met them head-on. Human Marines moved in tight formations, their exosuits enhancing their speed and strength. They moved through the station with brutal efficiency, clearing room after room with precision gunfire. "Push forward!" a sergeant barked over the comms. "No survivors! Make sure these bastards know who we are!" A Zarkari officer tried to rally his troops. "They cannot win!" he roared. "Stand firm! Humanity is weak!" One. A Gauss round from a Marine's rifle blew his head apart before he could finish. The humans pressed forward, and within an hour, Vel-Rax was theirs. The few surviving Zarkari warriors surrendered, their weapons clattering to the floor. For the first time in history, a human flag was raised over a Zarkari military station. On the bridge of the Retribution, Carter received the final report. "Vel-Rax is secure," Liu confirmed. "Enemy casualties are estimated at 70%. The rest are prisoners. No survivors escaped the system." Carter nodded. "And our losses?" "Minimal," Liu said. 38 dead, 100 wounded." A heavy price, but far lower than he had anticipated. The first human victory in Zarkari space was complete. But Carter wasn't finished. He turned back to the holotable, highlighting the next target. "We don't stop here," he said. "We hit them again, harder, faster, make them fear every shadow in the void." The war had begun, and humanity was done waiting. The fall of Vel-Rax station sent shockwaves across the galaxy. For centuries, the Zarkari had ruled with undisputed power, expanding their empire through fear and brute force. Their doctrine was simple: dominate or destroy. No species had ever dared to challenge them on their own ground. Until now. Reports of the station's loss spread like wildfire. The Zarkari High Command was in chaos, their war councils filled with shrieking arguments and panicked debates. Some saw the attack as a fluke, an anomaly, Others saw it for what it was, a declaration of war. And war was something the Zarkari were not used to losing. Within hours, the Imperium's response came. Fleet movements near the border systems tripled. Warships that had once patrolled the trade lanes were recalled to military strongholds. Entire planets were put under martial law, bracing for the human counterattack that the Zarkari knew was coming. But Admiral Carter wasn't waiting for them to prepare. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, he watched as the fleet moved into formation. Velrax was just the beginning. The real strike was about to begin. "Status on the fleet?" Carter asked, his voice calm despite the storm brewing around him. Commander Liu scanned her terminal. "All ships report battle readiness. The Vanguard and Titan are still undergoing repairs, but we have reinforcements from the UHS Indomitable and the Hammerfall. The fleet stands at 80 warships strong." A formidable force. But against the Zarkari Imperium, it was still a fraction of what humanity would need to win this war. That's why Carter had chosen the next target carefully. "Bring up the Zaltor system," he ordered. The holographic map shifted, displaying a system deep within Zarkari-controlled space. Unlike Velrax, which had been a logistics hub, Zaltor was a full military garrison, a fortified stronghold guarding a key hyperlane used to move warships between Zarkari sectors. Taking it would be suicide under normal circumstances. But these weren't normal circumstances. "They'll expect us to strike somewhere along the border," Carter said, studying the map. "They won't believe we have the audacity to go this deep into their territory." General Vargas, appearing over the comms, scoffed. "Because it is audacious, Carter. We take this, and we don't just wound them, we gut their military supply chains." He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "What's the plan?" Carter smirked. "We make them think we're somewhere else." 1 week later, Zaltor System Admiral Carven of the Zarkari Defense Fleet sat comfortably in his war throne aboard the ZIS Wrath of Kazul, watching the latest intelligence reports. Human activity had been detected near the border, exactly where he expected them to be. Small skirmishes, minor raids, nothing of real significance. It was laughable. The humans thought themselves predators, but they were gnats before the might of the Imperium. His fleet was ready. The humans would come, and they would be crushed. Then, suddenly, the alarms blared. "Incoming fleet detected," a panicked officer screeched. "Admiral, it's the humans!" Carven jolted forward. "What? Where?" "Here, sir, in the Zaltor system." His blood ran cold. That was impossible. Before he could react, the Zarkari holomap lit up with chaos. Human warships were already descending upon the system's defense stations, unleashing brutal precision strikes. Key weapons platforms were taken offline before they could fire. Hyperlane relays were jammed, isolating Zaltor from calling for reinforcements. And then, the UHS Retribution entered the fray. From the bridge of his flagship, Carven watched as the human fleet cut through his defenses like a scalpel. Their tactics were unlike anything he had ever seen. Coordinated, ruthless, perfectly timed. This wasn't just an attack. This was a slaughter. Carven barely had time to react before a message pinged on his screen. A direct transmission. He hesitated, then accepted. The holographic image of Admiral Carter appeared before him. The human's blue eyes were ice cold. "This is our galaxy now," Carter said. "You just live in it." Then the Retribution's cannons fired, and the Wrath of Kazul burned. The ZIS Wrath of Kazul erupted in a fireball, its wreckage spiraling into the void. The ship, once the pride of the Zarkari fleet, was now nothing more than scattered debris, floating among the dying remnants of the system's defenses. The UHS Retribution soared through the battlefield, its gun batteries still glowing hot from the final barrage. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge, watching the destruction unfold. Zaltor was falling. Status? He asked, his tone calm, controlled. Commander Liu scanned her console. The Wrath is down. Their admiral is confirmed, KIA. Remaining enemy forces are in full retreat. She glanced at him. We've won, sir. A slow nod. Losses? We took damage to the Hammerfall, and the Vanguard lost its portside guns, but our fleet remains at 75% combat strength. Liu paused. Ground forces are still engaged in mop-up operations. Resistance is minimal. Carter understood why. The Zarkari were breaking. For centuries they had fought as conquerors. They had never been on the other side of the blade. And now, they were scrambling, panicked, fleeing like cowards. Good. Carter turned to the communication officers. Patch me through to the fleet. A moment later, his image was broadcasted to every human warship in the system. This is Admiral Carter, he said, voice steady. Zaltor is ours. Another Zarkari stronghold has fallen, but we are not finished. His eyes burned with intensity. We will not stop. We will not retreat. We will not give them time to recover. His hands curled into fists. They thought no one would come for our people. They thought they could exterminate us without consequence. They were wrong. He leaned forward. Now, we make them pay. The war changed after Zaltor. For the first time in history, the Zarkari Imperium was on the defensive. Their fleets, once symbols of unstoppable power, were now being pulled back to protect their core systems. Entire border worlds were abandoned, left to rot as the Zarkari scrambled to reinforce their crumbling empire. The High Council of the Imperium was in disarray. The humans are like a disease, one warlord hissed, his mandibles clicking in agitation. They spread and consume without warning. We must crush them now before they infect the entire galaxy. Another slammed a clawed fist on the war table. And how, brother? They have outmaneuvered us at every turn. Their tactics are unpredictable. Their weapons are deadlier than we believed. And their soldiers. He exhaled sharply. Their soldiers fight as if they have nothing to lose. A heavy silence fell over the chamber. The Zarkari had assumed that humanity would surrender after the first invasion, that the loss of a single colony would break them. Instead, they had awakened a force unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. And now, the humans were coming for them. Meanwhile, aboard the UHS Retribution, Carter stood before a new holographic map, one that displayed the next phase of the war. His fleet was no longer just a human fleet. The recent victories had drawn allies to their side, species that had once been too afraid to oppose the Zarkari. Now, they had hope. Now, they had a chance. General Vargas stood beside him, arms crossed. We've sent a message, Carter. The whole damn galaxy knows we're not backing down. Carter nodded. Good. His gaze locked onto the Zarkari homeworld, still untouched in the heart of their empire. Because this war doesn't end until we stand on their soil. And for the first time in history, the predators were becoming the prey. The war escalated with brutal efficiency. Humanity did not fight like the Zarkari. The Imperium had always waged wars of domination, swift invasions, overwhelming force, and absolute rule. But humans? Humans fought like survivors. They fought like a species that had crawled out of its own ashes more times than history could count. Zarkari fleets fell one after another, their mighty warships torn apart in ambushes they never saw coming. Supply lines were cut, entire colonies abandoned as the Imperium struggled to contain the wildfire that humanity had become. And then came the coup de grace. On the bridge of the UHS Retribution, Carter stood over the glowing holomap. The image flickered with the details of their latest assault, a coordinated multi-front attack on the Zarkari core worlds. Target confirmed, Liu reported. We're hitting Kazaran Prime, one of their primary homeworlds. She looked up. their last major industrial hub. Carter studied the projection. Defenses? Massive, Vargas admitted. Planetary shields, orbital defense stations, 3 full Zarkari warfleets in orbit. But, he smirked, they're stretched thin. They've moved too many forces to reinforce their crumbling front lines. This world is critical. If we take it, they won't recover. Carter exhaled slowly. This was it. The moment where history would be written. Deploy the fleet, he ordered. Full assault. The bridge officers rushed to carry out his command. The engines of 70 human warships ignited, pushing forward toward Kazaran Prime. The final bastion before the Zarkari homeworld itself. The final push. The battle for Kazaran Prime began like all the others, with fire and fury. Humanity's fleet emerged from the void, weapons already hot, unleashing hell before the Zarkari even had time to react. The first wave of human torpedoes obliterated orbital defense platforms, reducing them to flaming wrecks. Zarkari warships scrambled to respond, but they were too slow. Humanity's warships moved like predators, weaving through enemy fire with unnatural coordination. They did not fight fair. They did not meet the Imperium in honorable battle. They fought to win. Within hours, the Zarkari fleets were shattered. Their defenses crumbled, and humanity descended upon the planet. Kazaran Prime burned. Drop pods rained from the sky, slamming into the surface like meteor strikes. Human soldiers stormed out, weapons blazing, cutting down anything that stood against them. The Zarkari ground forces tried to resist, but the fear was already there. The knowledge that they were fighting something they couldn't stop. Carter's forces pushed toward the capital, tearing through defensive lines like they were paper. Streets became battlegrounds. Cities became tombs for the Imperium. And then, the moment came. The capital fell. Human boots stood on Zarkari soil, banners raised over the shattered remains of the Imperium's greatest stronghold. The Zarkari High Council, once so proud, so untouchable, now hid in fear. For the first time in history, the Imperium was kneeling. Carter stood in the ruins of their government halls, staring down at the Zarkari Supreme Chancellor, the last leader of an empire that had once ruled the stars. "You should have left us alone," Carter said coldly. The Chancellor trembled. Carter raised his weapon, and with one shot, the Imperium died. The war was over. The galaxy was forever changed. Humanity was no longer the prey, no longer the ones who feared the dark. They were the ones who dominated it. And when the stars spoke of war again, they would whisper only one name: Earth.